So here's some learnings that I take away from this, right? The lean track, to me, that lean stream is not the same as the agile. Now, I'll waffle a little bit on this because I forget the name, his name right now, but if you search for Agile UX, you'll find his material. And the Agile UX is really similar to what I'm doing, actually, with the lean UX. I've tried to shy away from using Agile because as soon as I use Agile, I get all that extra baggage of all the ceremonies of backlogs and grooming the backlog and release planning and all those things that come with the scrums and scrum of scrums. I'm trying to keep the lean UX track, the design track, the experience track as free of process as possible, because it's about innovation, it's about ideation, it's about iterating as fast as possible. Thinking like a startup. If you were doing a startup and you had 2 or 3 of you in a garage, you would not get an agile coach. You wouldn't get a scrum master. You wouldn't do any of that nonsense, right? You do it because teams get bigger and you have to have that sort of discipline. So I avoid adopting all the agile ceremonies in the lean UX track. Again, agile focus on engineering, lean focus on learning. Agile contains many ceremonies, lean contains few. You'll have the PDF. I'm not going to go through all this because it's eye chart, right? But a few things like, when am I done? Well, I pass acceptance criteria here, but here I learned something from the customer, right? I have a working product. Here I have, a user testable experience, right? Let's see. Here, I might use things like Rally or some other kind of planning tools. Here, I just use a whiteboard, or I might use stickies, something as simple like that. Working code, well, yes, here in our world, what we're doing at PayPal, the UI bits are working code, and they're the same code we use in production. The dev bits aren't. We simulate those through Node. But I'll talk about our weird, unique situation. It's not perfectly ideal, and we're moving target when we get into the technology piece in the afternoon. Let's see, engineering-focused experience, learning, that sort of thing, right? So you can review that later when you look at the PDF. Another is the importance of co-location, if at all possible, right? Now, I'll give you a counterpoint here in a minute, but we actually had in the team, the lead designer was in Scottsdale. We were in San Jose. The other designer who came on to focus on the member flow in the checkout, Cody from Scottsdale was focusing on the guest flow, or the visitor or non-PayPal member flow in the guest checkout. He was in Scottsdale, she was in Austin. So, it's not a perfect world, right? You can't just make everybody live in the same place. But what we did do was, early on we saw there's a problem, so we said, well, look, can Cody come out and spend, 3 or 4 days a week for the first few weeks, so we get a rhythm going, and that got us to a shared understanding, got us to deeper collaboration, and so that helped a good bit. Now, what we also did though was, this is from one of our war rooms. This is actually what we jokingly call Cody Cam, because that's Cody there, and Christina was there in Austin, and this is us here, right? You see our messy mess here, but and they were just live feed the whole day, and if they wanted to speak up, they'd just start talking, or if we would ask them a question, we'd say something to them. But it was like they were in the room. So it's one way to kind of do this, right? To sort of facilitate that. Now it's tricky, because we have teams, all over the world. We got teams in Chennai, I got teams in Chennai and Singapore and Austin and Boston and New York and Scottsdale, and what we're doing now is focusing on our product folks, our product organization, our design organization, and engineering. We're working very close together to figure out which products will be where, mainly focused. And so in that area, we want to make sure we have complete teams of design, product, and engineering, so they can work in a lean UX and agile fashion and work together. And where we don't have a representative, we have to have a proxy in place, somebody who can make the on-the-ground decisions during the day so that you don't have this long cycle like in Chennai, where it's 12 and a half hours or 13 and a half hours difference, or Singapore, which is like 15 or whatever it is, which is a really odd one for us because there's only like a couple hours a day that's a window you can actually have a communication. Skype can work, lots of other stuff. Are most of you guys, your teams, co-located in the same region, area? Is anybody not?
I worked with the Italians for a while.
What's that?
I had co-workers in Italy for a while.
India, yeah. That's tough.
Italy.
Oh, Italy, okay. Yeah. How'd that work? Challenging.
It's challenging.
You like the laugh? The laugh was very telling.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is always really hard. So there's a counterpoint to this, though. There's a good article just recently, I got the link at the bottom, about adopting an open source process. The GitHub folks eat their own dog food, right? And they really believe in distributed open source development. And you see this Mozilla also does a lot of distributed development and stuff. So they really are strong on believing that the electronic, discussion, planning, and operations should be in high fidelity electronics, And they also, and I'm a big fan of this, that expose all your work continuously. All your work should have a URL. I've been a big proponent of this for a number of years now. The first thing is I go in a company, and it was at Netflix the same way, and at Yahoo and other places, like, whatever your work is, I want to see it on a URL. I want to be able to get to it. I don't want it to be in just somebody's file system. Let's run it with an Apache server or whatever we have to do to get us a URL to that thing. And it should have, there's tools that do this for you that sort of like front your design stuff and your stuff, and you can sort of browse it and all that, right? It needs to have a URL so it can be accessible. And asynchronous, almost nothing should require direct interruption. So they say you shouldn't have to be in the same meat space. That's what they call it, meat space. We put all the meat together, the human meat in one room, right? And lock-free, I agree with this too. Also avoid synchronization points and cooperation without full coordination all the time. Where you're kind of like highly aligned and loosely coupled. And I actually really like this. It's a good article. I think to me it does make sense to try to strive for co-location if all possible, and then take the points that GitHub has raised in their article, and you put the two together, and you sort of get some sort of a balance, because you're just not going to always have that. And sometimes people may have a reason they have to go somewhere else and work from or whatever, and we shouldn't just be totally limited to that, right? Technology is just still not quite there, it seems. Although some pretty good tools. I think I mentioned some a little bit later. Create a team working agreement. This is really important. So decide who your decision maker is, define your cadence, define how you work together, and define what hypotheses you're working on. I mean, one of the early days, probably a couple weeks in, we identified like 8 different hypotheses that we were driving to try to find learnings for the checkout process. Normally PayPal redirects during the checkout, and we're going to do an in-context checkout. Would that really resonate with customers? What about security? Would they feel this is secure? Was it better to have more explicit steps or try to combine things together and less? Those different things like that. So we actually, at some point too, around our cadence, because we were having all these conflicts, we kept having new people come on the team, and at first it caused some, and I'll talk about that in the anti-patterns, it caused some problems. We finally just went on the whiteboard and said, okay, here's our cadence. Monday, let's just kind of start at Thursday's usability. So everything kind of revolves around that. And everybody's in the usability session and observing it. And we have time built between each one of the participants coming in so that we can actually change the code on the fly in case there was something, just an obvious problem that we need to fix. Or sometimes we actually said, well, crap, there's a much better way to do this, and we actually changed some designs that are actually in the living code right now that came from, this is usually called RITE, or Rapid Iteration Testing Environment, RITE is the process if you Google it, but it's changing the code through the day, to the usability sessions. Usability review, this requires your usability team to be very lean themselves. They're turning around their report the next day. right? So they were bought into the process and excited about it. And then, David, our president, will usually drop in, sit down and hear the usability review and, give his thoughts and stuff. 3 o'clock is figure out what to do next week. Come back in all day is really, coding 2 days, and nobody worked the weekends on this stuff. And then, feedback, iterative coding, 4 p.m. It had to be delivered to usability so they could get, their stuff ready, kind of, to think through their scripts and stuff. And that was the cadence we kept going through. Because we got a working agreement on this, it made the team really work really well together. And yours will be different, your cadence, your working agreement. It could just be principles even. I think it's really, really important to do that as a team. If and something we sometimes forget about. Make sure you sprint faster than Agile. Agile is, burdened with some of the delivery mechanisms, set up and tear down, 2-week, 3-week, 4-week sprints, whatever you're doing. We were doing this every Thursday. We slowed down though as time went on because you can only feed so much change into the Agile machine at some point, right? So that change funnel kind of goes down. Although the UI bits can still change a good bit, the content, stuff like that. But if you're going to switch flows around, the back-end engineering team is going to get a little pissed at you after a while. I mean, they should have the software so it can adapt to that, but reality is reality, right? Make sure you do lots of sketching to code. So, here's one of the early sessions in our smaller war room where we had our designers over here, our lead designer there, Jeff, our head of product there. Eric was actually building our Node framework at the time. He usually wasn't ever looking at them. He was just coding, building the framework, which is where our framework came out of this process. There's the flow of the checkout, and usually Jeff and Wah were, she's not pictured here, but I think she's off screen. That's one of our other product leads. That's another product lead there. They were, live coding it. And one of the funny stories is, like the second weekend, Cody here has been sketching furiously. They've been talking, the design team, and Jeff's been sitting there, listening and coding it, and having conversations while he's coding. And at some point, he says, well, so what do you guys want me to do? This is getting to be the afternoon. It's like, should I go put this like in Azure, which is a mock-up tool? That was his favorite tool. Or should I put this in Photoshop or what? And Jeff's like, turns the laptop around and says, well, here it is. And so we did the walkthrough, and he goes, well, what am I supposed to do? His whole world kind of was turned upside down, because he was ready to go off and create all this documentation, deliver documentation, right? We didn't need it. We had the living, working, code there, from the UI side. And we also, because we had Node, we were building out the flow too, and had the controller logic and all that into it. And it's gotten to where with HTML, you can pretty rapidly do this sort of thing. Making the spec real, the prototype becomes the spec. I don't want to take this too far because you have to, it's not the only documentation, okay, but it is a good part of the documentation. So, this is like, I think this was like the first week. It was pretty crappy, just had like, hi Jeff, and had your name. I had several things in the flow. And that's back when we had our potato griller. So we had this fake Williams and Sonoma, potato griller. The funny story there is we're in usability testing, and this one guy, because we have this dimension about sharing, there's a Facebook aspect to this, social aspect to this too, and the checkout process where you can use Facebook to pre-fill your information. And so we're trying to test some of those ideas. And he goes, and we don't share any of this stuff on Facebook, right? We say that and all that, but people don't read. He goes, he says, well, why didn't you pick the Facebook option? He says, well, I don't want anybody to know I'm buying a potato griller on Facebook. Just got to be so funny. So we actually got rid of the potato griller because he had such a violent reaction to the potato griller. So this was really super low fidelity at the beginning, and as it went over time, it's the same. Our prototype mock-up right now, the UI bits for it is the same thing we have running in production. So there's no difference between the two. What about docs? Watch out predicted documentation. Watch out for documentation replaces collaboration as a Band-Aid for bad process, and look for documentation that actually enhances collaboration, shared understanding, and learning. So I can't tell you exactly what that is. I'm giving you the kind of the principles behind it to sort of think through, right?